In December 1980, a group of designers gathered in Milan around one architect, Sottsass, with a shared and fairly simple grievance. They were exhausted by functionalism. Decades of modernist doctrine had insisted that good design meant restraint. Form following function, ornament treated as a kind of dishonesty, color used sparingly if at all. Sottsass had a phrase for what this produced. He said all anyone ever heard about was functionalism, and that it was not enough, that sensual, engaging design mattered too. The group named themselves after a Bob Dylan song that happened to be playing on repeat that night, and the following year they staged an exhibition that shocked the design world on purpose. Furniture that looked like it was arguing with itself. Bookshelves with no obvious top or bottom. Plastic laminate, a material associated with cheap kitchen counters, used deliberately on objects that were supposed to be luxurious. Memphis design was never trying to be tasteful. It was trying to prove that taste itself was a kind of trap. The reception was as divided as the group intended. Some of the most influential cultural figures of the decade embraced it immediately. David Bowie collected it, Karl Lagerfeld decorated an entire apartment in it, and fashion houses began quoting its geometry within years. Other critics were considerably less kind. Terence Conran, one of the most respected furniture designers of the 20th century, dismissed the entire movement as joke junk. Both reactions were responding to the same intentional provocation. Memphis furniture mixed materials that were never supposed to go together, hardwood beside plastic, lacquer beside brass, and combined colors that clashed on purpose rather than by accident. It was, by design, impossible to ignore and easy to dislike. For a few years in the early 1980s, that combination made it one of the most talked about design movements in the world. It appeared in television sets, in fashion editorials, in the apartments of people who wanted their homes to announce something about them immediately. It was loud in a decade that was, by most other measures, already loud. The same qualities that made Memphis design famous made it commercially unsustainable. By the middle of the decade, the group's most prominent member, Sottsass himself, had left. By 1987, the collective had formally disbanded, undone partly by the difficulty of repeating their early commercial success, and partly because a style built on shock value has a structural problem. Shock does not survive repetition. As the 1980s ended, design culture turned sharply toward a calmer, more restrained aesthetic, and Memphis design's clashing colors and aggressive geometry came to be seen not as bold, but as dated, a specific, slightly embarrassing artifact of a decade that the design world was eager to move past. For roughly 20 years, it existed mainly in vintage shops, design history textbooks, and the occasional ironic reference. This is the part of the story most revivals skip over, and the part worth sitting with. Memphis design did not fade gradually. It was actively, deliberately left behind by a culture that decided, fairly quickly, that it had been a mistake. The first signs of genuine revival did not come from interior design at all. They came from fashion. Around the early 2010s, major houses including Dior and Missoni began incorporating Memphis-inspired geometry and color blocking into their collections, a sign that something the design world had dismissed as dated was being reread by a different industry as simply bold. Interiors followed more slowly and more carefully. Original Memphis pieces, once considered commercially difficult, started appearing in major retrospectives, a 40th anniversary exhibition. Museum shows that treated the movement with the seriousness usually reserved for design history rather than design nostalgia. Collectors who would have struggled to sell a Memphis piece in the 1990s were now bidding on them at auction. This sequence matters because it tells you something about how genuine design revivals actually happen. They rarely start with the original audience deciding they were wrong. They start with an adjacent industry rediscovering the same idea for an unrelated reason, and interiors catching up once the cultural permission has already been granted somewhere else. The specific reason small apartments have become the place where Memphis design is being revived, rather than large homes, comes down to a mechanism the movement's original critics never anticipated. Memphis design was built around bold, attention-demanding individual objects: a single chair, a single bookshelf, a single lamp, each one designed to be looked at rather than blended in with. In a large room, one Memphis piece can feel isolated, a strange outlier surrounded by acres of unrelated space. In a small room, that same single piece has nowhere to be isolated from. It is close to everything else in the room by necessity, which means it functions exactly the way the original Memphis group intended its objects to function, as the obvious, undeniable center of attention, impossible to lose track of. Small apartments also solve Memphis design's other historical problem: cost. A full room of Memphis Milano originals was, and remains, prohibitively expensive. A single Memphis-inspired chair or lamp, as the one bold object in an otherwise simple small room, is achievable in a way that an entire Memphis house never was. And a small room only needs one or two such objects to read clearly as Memphis-influenced, where a large room would need considerably more to achieve the same effect. Every account of Memphis design's return points to the same underlying driver, regardless of which industry rediscovered it first: a specific exhaustion with minimalism, and a corresponding hunger for individuality and joy that a decade of restrained, neutral interiors had quietly failed to provide. This is worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as simple nostalgia. Memphis design was created, in the first place, as a direct rebellion against an earlier era's obsession with restraint. Its revival is happening for almost exactly the same reason, decades later, in a culture that had once again decided minimalism was the only acceptable answer to how a home should look. The specific shape of the comeback, small accents in otherwise calm rooms, rather than full immersive 1980s rooms, suggests something the original movement never quite figured out. Boldness does not need to be constant to be effective. It needs only to be unmistakable, placed somewhere it cannot be ignored, in a room calm enough to let it actually be seen. Every account of Memphis design's return points to the same underlying driver, regardless of which industry rediscovered it first: a specific exhaustion with minimalism, and a corresponding hunger for individuality and joy that a decade of restrained, neutral interiors had quietly failed to provide. This is worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as simple nostalgia. Memphis design was created, in the first place, as a direct rebellion against an earlier era's obsession with restraint. Its revival is happening for almost exactly the same reason, decades later, in a culture that had once again decided minimalism was the only acceptable answer to how a home should look. The specific shape of the comeback, small accents in otherwise calm rooms, rather than full immersive 1980s rooms, suggests something the original movement never quite figured out. Boldness does not need to be constant to be effective. It needs only to be unmistakable, placed somewhere it cannot be ignored, in a room calm enough to let it actually be seen. One bold object, a calm room around it. That is the whole revival. Subscribe for more interior design videos. And tell us in the comments, would you actually live with this style, or just admire it from a distance?